everybody. Welcome to the Untitled Themed Entertainment Design Lockdown Show.
It's so nice to see you all.
It's so nice to see everybody out there. Who's watching? Chime in. Where are you from? Make some shout-outs, folks. I'm Patrick Klink from Orlando, Florida. Well, I live here now. What about you, Andy?
I'm here from beautiful Burbank.
What's your shirt you're wearing today?
Oh, this is Yogasaki Sushi Burrito Panchito. It's a now just a food truck here in LA that have sushi burritos, which is an amazing thing if you've never had one.
What would you get in a burrito like that?
Well, it's not like a traditional burrito. It's wrapped in either seaweed or rice paper. So it's like basically it's a giant sushi roll that you eat like a burrito.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, with, spicy tuna, shrimp tempura, salmon, eel, whatever you want in it. And they also have this amazing thing that I miss terribly is spicy tuna nachos. So it's just a little tray of Doritos covered with a dollop of spicy tuna and spicy mayonnaise and eel sauce, and it's just I love them so much. And they used to have a brick and mortar shop in Vegas, which was always our first stop driving in. We'd stop and have lunch and then go to the Cosmo, but they closed that just a month or two before the pandemic. So they already decided it wasn't for them. So anyway, Yogasaki Sushi Burrito. Oh, hey, Christian Marcus.
There you go. Hello, Christian. Thanks for following us.
I just talked to Christian today. It was very nice to talk to him. Good friend of mine.
So we gotta. So there's nothing bigger in the news. I mean, you can't avoid it. You go on CNN, you see that that Walt Disney World has reopened, and of course, anybody in the industry knows that SeaWorld reopened, Universal reopened last month, Fun Spot opened last month, or maybe before that as well. We know that Legoland reopened, no mask required. We know Busch Gardens opened, so Central Florida parks are open, and basically. We all aware that that Florida is the latest epicenter of the hotspot cases. Orlando, Orange County, Florida had about 1,500 yesterday or 1,300 yesterday, and then we have a little bit under 1,000 today.
Well, you're only 10% of the whole state count. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And then we know we had a pretty big week, 15,000 cases in one day, breaking all records. Per capita, we're 4 times worse off than Florida is right now. And obviously the governments are taking different tactics. However, I think anybody who's watching can kind of take their own point of view about whether or not things should be reopening. But Disney's taken the position that it's just like restaurants. Restaurants are reopening. This is actually from a Josh Delamora, whatever his name is. He gave a comment saying, well, restaurants are open, so we're going to open too, basically is what he said. I'm not being candid, or I'm not trying to be catty about it. That is literally what he said in response. And so we're not necessarily here to debate or discuss the merits of the parks reopening, but we got a firsthand experience. I will just talk about my personal experience, and then we're going to bring on Ben, who's waiting in the green room. He's like ready to come out swinging. He's gone to the parks, and back when the caseload was pretty low in Orlando, maybe when we were like about 50 a day. Just my personal anecdotal story. I will just say I can only speak to my own experiences. And then of course we can all highlight things that we see online. Andy, we were talking about Disney Springs reopening. I went 3 times. It was very early on in the early days. First time went really early on in the afternoon. It was great. Everyone was wearing masks, no issues. Second time, didn't really notice a problem, but then we got kind of rained out at the boathouse. We were on the dock and got rained out, so the place had cleared out. And then the last time I went, the mask wearing was not good. People just didn't have them on. There was no enforcement. Security guards were walking by guests who did not have them on and didn't say a word. And then at that point, I was like, I'm not really comfortable with this anymore. And then we went back into lockdown. And then a few weeks later, the cases kind of exploded. I'm not saying that's corollary or, correlating in any way, but that's just been the case. And my house has been in lockdown ever since. And it is personal. There's people out there that are going and traveling and going on big, you went to Las Vegas. So I'm not here to judge in any way, shape, or form. I'm just here to report. And so without, do you have any commentary before we bring Ben on after I just kind of said the things?
Well, it's funny as Nathan, my housemate, who we went to Vegas together. He really put it concisely. We threaded the needle with Vegas. We were there right at the bottom of the curve when there were less than 200 cases in the whole city, and then when we left, it just went straight up. And we were supposed to be there right now for his birthday, but obviously I'm not in Vegas. So much to my great sorrow. I mean, but it's it just would be foolish to go with everything trending the way that it is. And I watch a lot of the Vegas Twitter, and it doesn't seem like Vegas is as much fun as it was certainly when we were there. Now everyone's wearing masks, everybody's grumpy about it, and there's a lot of confrontations, and it's just like it's not worth it. But also it's interesting too that today Hong Kong Disneyland closed again.
Right.
They had 57 new cases, and they're like, nope, everything's closed. Shut it down. Shut it all down.
That is.
They are with 15,000 new cases in Florida, and they're just like, no, but open the gates.
Yeah.
Two very different approaches.
Very different approaches. And folks, we do welcome you to comment. Of course, keep it civil. We don't want to have a weird, hostile environment. Everyone's friends. This is a friendly chat. But let's go ahead and bring Ben on. So, without further ado, hey Ben, how you doing,
Hello. Man? Center myself here. Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's Ben Wszalek. It's nice to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Good to see you too. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. It's funny, of course. One of the big things about lockdown is it's harder or impossible in some cases to socialize, and I love getting to talk about theme parks with other theme park people. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you.
And just so for those of you that don't know you, and actually I just kind of met you, even though we had a weird cross paths. Like you worked with my cousin-in-law.
I did, yes, many years ago.
Well, people love to hear the origin story. So would you mind sharing who you are, where you've been, and where you are today? And we'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So I'm Ben Wszalek, as you said. I'm originally from Los Angeles, from SoCal. Was born in Burbank, right by the Disney Studios. And funnily enough, I didn't really. My origin story wasn't from a desire to be on the design side of theme parks. I really got interested in theme parks in high school. First of all, because I was sort of a jack of all trades who didn't really have a specific thing he was interested in. And theme parks just offered this big, wide array of different creative and technical aspects that seemed really enticing. And second of all, around that time that I was in high school was also when Disneyland was celebrating its 50th anniversary, 15 long years ago. And so my parents and I started going a bit more. We usually go once a year, so we're going more often. And I sort of thought, oh yeah, theme parks. This is like a thing people do for a living. But I didn't want to be. I didn't have an interest in like being an Imagineer, working for Universal Creative, those kinds of things. Because my impression at the time was that you had all this interesting stuff going on at the theme parks, and then you had a bunch of folks in a warehouse in Glendale somewhere, an hour or two away, who kind of were staring at drawings and maybe only occasionally actually going to a theme park. And so I really thought I wanted to be more on the operations side. So I got a job working at Disneyland, at the Disneyland Hotel, with your cousin-in-law, Jessica, and did that while I was in college. And then after I graduated college, I came down to Orlando, and I was a management intern at Disney, working at the Grand Floridian, and then I worked at Fort Wilderness. I worked at 2 of the 3 All-Stars. But after I liked hotels a lot, I still do. But after a few years, I kind of felt like, maybe I'm the guy who really likes movies and got a job at the Cineplex, and I can see all the movies, but I'm not really any closer to being a part of that. And so that's when I decided that maybe it was time to actually make a career change and get involved in the design and implementation side. So I moved back to LA and worked for some smaller companies that were working in concept design on various theme park projects.
How did you break in?
How did I break in? So,
from operations to being in the business.
That's a great question. I got really lucky, actually, that I'd made some friends online who were also into theme parks, and through them, I got introduced to a gentleman named Gary Blumenstein, who now works for Universal as well. He's been very involved with a lot of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter attractions, including being creative director on Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure that just opened last year. And he was joining this new firm called Rethink Leisure Entertainment that was kind of a theme park startup, I might say, back in LA. And they were kind of looking for people and got involved there. And then when that project ended and I was kind of released back into the wild, again, just through connections of people I knew, I was able to get a job at another company called Favili Studio that was doing some work in China. And then by the time I came to applying to work at Universal Creative, by that point, I'd worked for 2 companies. I traveled to China a whole lot. I knew a lot of people in the industry. And, I applied for positions, never got a call or anything like that. And it turned out that someone I had worked with at the All-Star, she was a housekeeping manager at the All-Star when I worked there, had gotten a job at Universal Creative because of just someone she had met socially. And so she was able to kind of put in the good word for me and help get my application looked at, and the rest is history. So I always hate to be like, well, it's who you know, because I feel like that's always a kind of unhelpful advice. But what I will say is it is who you know, but you never know who the person you know is. For all the contacts that I had made in the industry over those course of years, it ended up being a random connection from someone I'd worked with in housekeeping at a hotel at a different company that we was in the position to be able to help me out.
I always say that getting into entertainment and having a career in entertainment is entirely about being the right person at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And that involves, who you meet, and then being able to step up to challenges and to walk the walk in addition to talking the talk.
Definitely. Well, I think it's tough because unlike, say, the film industry, which can be tough to break into also, but on a year-to-year basis, the number of film or TV production projects that are happening is roughly the same. There's the same amount of screens and channels that got to be filled every year, and companies that are there to make content for that. But with theme parks, you can easily have a thing where one year Disney or Universal is opening up a new park, or Galaxy's Edge is being built, Shanghai Disneyland's being built, and then the next year they're not. And it might be another 5 years or 10 years before there's a big park project. And so, unfortunately, I think the timing aspect of it is very important because, like in any industry, at a time where there's a lot of work happening and there's a real demand for personnel, it's going to be a lot easier to find someone who's going to take a chance on you and say, well, they may not have a lot of, theme park industry experience, but they have the kind of experience that I need, that I know they'll be able to do this job. Whereas if it's a year where there's not as much work going on, and those people who are hiring have a lot more people to choose from, and there may be a lot more people with industry experience who are looking for work, they're able to be much more discriminating. So unfortunately, I think a big part of it is hoping that you can time it to get in at a period when there's a lot of demand for people and not a lot of people out there who are available, and then be able to build up enough experience and contacts during those years where it's feast, so that when you get to the years where it's famine, you can rely on those contacts and that experience to continue to find work.
Yeah, very true.
Well said.
Cool. Well, so thanks for and now what can you talk about what you do now at all in general?
Yeah, fortunately I can. I'm an associate project manager. I'm working on Universal Studios Beijing, over in Beijing, China. And believe me, we could fill a whole episode talking about the challenges just the everyday challenges of building a park in China, and then the 2020 challenges of trying to, when being really deep in construction in China while COVID is happening. But yeah, it's been a great project. Obviously, I am not in China. Funnily enough, I literally was supposed to go on a business trip like February 20th, and it was right when things were starting to get bad in mainland China, but it hadn't hit the US at all yet. And so there was kind of this funny period where the US seemed safe and China didn't. And now we flipped and China seems pretty safe and the US seems pretty not. So just goes to show it's a tough world. But yeah, it's a really great park. And we do have, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, some official Universal Beijing social media feeds. So definitely check that out. Still on track to be opening to the public next year. I'm not too worried about that because China seems to have this pretty much under control. I don't know when we U.S. nationals will be allowed to go visit, but yeah, we're moving along.
Well, and it's a logistic nightmare where to get somebody to go on a business trip there, they have to be in quarantine for 14 days. So, that's a long trip.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's kind of the easy part because first of all, the government is administering that quarantine. So there are specific sort of hotel facilities for people who are coming in who need to quarantine. They're providing you food and all that. So they're taking care of all that for you. The hard part is that as of the current moment, even if you are a non-citizen permanent resident who lives in China full time, if you are not physically in China right now, they will not let you in. Even if unless you are a Chinese citizen, they will not let you into the country. So that obviously creates a lot of challenges.
What about like people with like work visas and things like that? No?
Nope. Unless you are a Chinese citizen or traveling under a diplomatic visa, no one is allowed in.
Wow. All right.
So, yeah.
Well, hopefully that'll be lifted by March because I have to go install an attraction in March.
Right? Yeah, I hope so too. Obviously, the state of the U.S. I think is not helping things, but I'd say that this is one area where obviously the way that China likes to run things, most companies and projects in China are at least in part state owned. So obviously they have a motivation to do what needs to be done to get these projects moving along and get them completed. Because it's not like, oh, it's just Universal coming in and building a theme park. It's literally their theme park too. So we're kind of all in it together to kind of find a way to make it work.
So here's what we thank you for sharing all your stuff about the China project. So maybe we can move on to talk a little bit about your experience in Central Florida theme parks. So
yeah,
you have quite a rap sheet of parks you've been to during this time.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you have photos or not, but you probably have one.
I have some photos I can share, especially when we talk about some of the specific things that are being done at the parks in terms of safety precautions. I will say that I think the headline is that the theme parks right now are quite empty, especially on weekdays. I think for Universal, because there's no advanced registration or anything that's currently required to get in, it gets a little bit busier on the weekends because obviously there's a lot of people like myself who work Monday through Friday. But I did have a chance to go to Disney World, both during the cast member previews as well as the annual pass holder previews, and then this past weekend when it was kind of open to everybody. And the number of people that's there, I would say, is somewhere between 5 and 10% of total capacity. It's talking about Disney specifically because they are doing a hard limit on you need an advanced sign up to even get in the gate. Yeah. And then I think for Universal, it's a little bit more, but on the busiest day, we're talking what you'd expect for, a rainy Tuesday in January or September. It's really not a lot of people. And I always have such mixed feelings about it because on the one hand, obviously we want people to come to keep the business going. But on the other hand, you don't want too many people there because then, is safety going to start to be compromised? So, like Andy was saying about threading the needle in Vegas before, I do think there is that aspect for theme parks of, how do you strike that balance of if you're operating theme parks and no one shows up, you're just going to be bleeding money and you might as well not even bother. But on the other hand, if too many people show up, it's going to become logistically challenging or impossible to maintain a safe environment. And, I think that obviously safety is very important to Disney Universal, but also, maintaining the reputation that they can be trusted to keep people safe. And I think they really know how delicate that trust is and how easy it's going to be for people to feel like, oh man, it's not safe, I'm not going there. So
I have a question for you. And I actually tweeted out a question to people who were going to parks. So
yeah.
And I'm not trying to, people are thinking this, we got a massive amount of cases in Orlando, massive amount of cases in Florida. And you were there, you went to Universal in the beginning stages when there really weren't a lot of cases in Orlando.
Sure.
It was 100 a day, under 100 a day or so. And so what are some of the reasons why you feel comfortable going, spending leisure time during this time and going to parks? Where's kind of your thought process on that?
So I will say for the times that I've been out of my house in the past month, because before that, we were really on lockdown like everyone else. And I'm still working from home, and we're actually in our office right now, or I'm in our office. So for the times that I've been out of my house into the public, the only times I've felt remotely safe, the only times that I've felt that the people around me were really heeding the needed precautions to be safe in a public environment were at theme parks. And so my feeling is that if anyone feels that they would be comfortable going out to a shop or to a cafe, or to any other, or certainly to a gym, but if you feel like you would be comfortable going out and patronizing any business, then there's probably no reason you shouldn't be comfortable going to a theme park. I feel considerably less safe going to my local Publix grocery store or going to Walmart to pick up food or other supplies for my house than I do going to theme parks. Partly because, theme parks are primarily outdoor activities. There's lots of big, spacious walkways. The number of people that are being let in is being capped. Obviously, there's temperature checks. Masks are required. And there's a lot of staff everywhere to make sure that people are distancing, that people are wearing masks. There's barriers being put up everywhere. Yesterday, I went to the Country Bear Jamboree, which is, like a 10, 12-minute long show. And not only we were all wearing masks, not only were we both skipping rows and leaving large spaces in between groups in each row, but then also and not only was there hand sanitizer available before and after, but also they were going through in between each show and spraying disinfectant on all the seats, and giving that a few moments. So, the level of precaution that is being taken and that is being enforced in theme park environments is magnitudes higher than almost anywhere else. I certainly understand the thing that says, look, I don't feel great about going to the grocery store, but I have to eat. Either I have to buy the groceries or I have to pay someone else to buy the groceries, but I don't have to go to theme parks. And, I got no disagreements with that. But I really don't agree with or don't understand the logic that theme parks represent some particular new and special danger to visitors or to employees that other businesses that are operating don't. So if you think, hey, you know what, we should be shutting it all down. It should be everyone stays at home and only goes out for the most vital, most necessary of business. Then sure, I can totally understand that perspective. But if there's this thing of like, well, I was okay when the local shops and restaurants were opening up, but theme park seems a bridge too far. I personally feel it's closer to the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point of like going out to a restaurant is basically leisure at that point, unless you're going in and out for takeout. It's more about a social thing that you want to do outdoors. So I totally understand that. Like and me personally, I'm not going to restaurants, so that's kind of a line that I'm like.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. There's obviously we've all been stuck at home for a while, and the things that we do in our lives that we do for leisure, we do to blow off steam, we do for social interaction. We've been away from those things. So for me, it's been very tough because on the one hand, I love theme parks. That's a lot of what I like to go out and do on my weekend in the before times. And being stuck at home all the time, not being able to go out, it's just me and my wife stuck at home, for months on end. It's psychologically quite challenging. And there's a relief to being able to go out and experience areas of entertainment and areas that are frankly designed to be comforting and reassuring. But, that is definitely tempered by the fact that there's definitely increased risk for any activity in which you're outside around other people, full stop. And secondly, that that fear of am I endangering myself, or in my case, the thing I really worry about is am I endangering others? Because that's the main thing that I don't want to do. It's one thing if I go do something stupid and I get it, but if I'm a vector that spreads it, to others and becomes part of the problem, that's really the one thing I don't want.
Yeah. Well, it's like I think Andy and I would feel very comfortable going to a park full of Bens. It's the others.
Well, it's a funny thing. So as Andy knows well, one of my other big passion besides theme parks is building and rebuilding my home theater. This has been a decade-long, very intense process. And so we were very excited when, like a month ago, like you said, when cases were on the downward trend, they announced that Hamilton was coming out, and we'd been spending a lot of COVID working on the home theater, saying, oh, yeah, cases are going down, stuff is reopening, and Hamilton's going to come out, because we're looking at, it's late May, Universal's announcing they're going to reopen June 1st, and Hamilton's coming out, July 3rd. We're thinking, oh, yeah, by July 3rd, we're going to be in a much better place. But then as we got closer to it, we weren't in a much better place. And so what we eventually ended up doing is we had one other couple over, all of us wearing masks the entire time, no shared food, no shared drinks, anything like that. They sat all the way on one side of the room. We sat all the way on the other side of the room, probably 10 or 12 feet apart. No hugs, no handshakes, and we watched the movie. So that's trying to be pretty cautious. But then even that, even under all of those circumstances, having someone over, having two people over, in an indoors environment with limited air circulation, for an extended period of time, you think, oh man, that's probably the platonic ideal for a social interaction. But even that is risky, and it's so tough. There's no easy answers.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I have a really big backyard, and I had planned a screening of Hamilton for the 4th of July as well, with food and drinks and friends, and even I'd even advertised it as like a socially distant 4th of July. I was gonna space out the seating and project the film onto the garage, our neighbor's garage, which is a almost 200-inch diagonal surface, and a week or two before, I was just like, I don't think I want that. I don't think any of my friends would want that. It's just not worth it. I mean, even Hamilton is not worth that risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's really tough, and I definitely don't have any criticism towards anyone who thinks, hey, you know what, going to a theme park right now, maybe that's not the best choice for me. But like I said, so all I would say is that among your options for leisure or food or shopping or entertainment out there in the world, well, in America, there's probably not a safer environment for you to be in than being, in the already very controlled environment of a theme park. But that being said, is the answer that we should just be staying at home? Maybe. I don't have the answers for that.
I mean, what would you say are the main differences between what Disney and Universal are doing to mitigate the situation?
So obviously there's temperature checks on the way in. We can debate how effective temperature checks are, but it's at least one layer of defense that's being done. Obviously in the case of Disney, they're doing a hard limit on how many people can come in by making everyone sign up in advance. For Universal, they are limiting the attendance of the park. They're not saying you have to sign up in advance, but they are saying, if we get to a certain amount of people, we're going to cut it off and we're going to stop letting people in. Also, modifying experiences. So like a great example would be at Universal, we recently opened the Bourne Stuntacular, which is a new indoor stunt show. So that's a difficult thing. It's a show, it's indoors. So first of all, the performers in the show are all wearing masks. Second of all, when you enter the theater, you're required, and this is true for all the attractions at Universal, you're required to use hand sanitizer to sanitize your hands to reduce the risk that you're going to touch something and be spreading some sort of virus.
Like a cruise ship. Like a cruise ship buffet or restaurant.
Yeah. So then, in terms of like a lot of theme park experiences, that show has a pre-show, which usually involves, there's a queue, then there's a pre-show room, then there's the actual theater. Instead of loading people into the pre-show room, they are using that whole room with social distancing as well as the whole queue to make sure that every group is at least 6 feet apart, and then using the monitors in the queue to play that pre-show video. Then when it comes time to enter the theater, they're loading groups, one group at a time, making sure that every other row is skipped and making sure there's at least 3 seats of distance between each group, making sure that everyone in the audience is wearing masks the entire show. And then when the show is over, letting one row exit at a time so that people aren't running into each other when they exit. And that's all just to be in a show for 20 minutes, and that's a lot of effort, I think it's always important to understand that when we talk about COVID precautions, everything is relative. It's not that a mask makes it safe and not wearing a mask makes it unsafe. It's that, it depends on, are you wearing a mask? How close are you to other people? Are you talking or singing or doing stuff that's going to, be more likely to express particulate matter? How long are you close to or in contact with other people? How long are you sharing that same space? I think that's another nice thing about theme parks is that you don't tend to spend a lot of time in one place. If you're on an attraction, you're maybe on an attraction for 5 minutes or 6 minutes. That attraction is moving, and then you're leaving. You're walking around outside. You're in a show for 15 minutes, and then you're leaving. So I think even compared to we talked about movie theaters opening, and the idea of, are you going to be able to have a bunch of people in a theater for 2.5 hours, not 20 minutes? And how are you going to be able to make sure that for that 2.5 hours, everyone has their masks on? In a theme park environment, you can have personnel in the theater watching guests to make sure they put their masks on. At an AMC, that's going to be tough. So, and then in the case of, especially with Disney as well, they're really focusing on having barriers even in attraction vehicles. So if you go on to the Jungle Cruise, and you might think, hey, Jungle Cruise, it's open air, it's outdoors, you can space people out on the boat so they're not super close to each other. But even beyond that, they're actually putting up physical plastic barriers between groups of guests just to reduce the chance that you're going to come into contact with someone or, breathe on someone or things like that. So a lot of attempts are being made to keep people safe. And I think one thing that's undervalued too, we can debate whether any individual precaution, how effective it's going to be in reducing the spread of the virus. But I think the other important aspect is reminding you to stay vigilant, reminding you that, hey, we are still in a pandemic, and you need to watch what you're doing, how close you're getting to people, and you need to make sure you're keeping your mask on. So I think having all of those very visible precautions and helping make sure you can keep people in that mindset is very important.
I just want to chime in, I'm not qualified to debate the merits of any of these safety precautions. Neither are you, Ben, or neither are you, Andy.
Absolutely.
So it's very clear that we're following what the scientists are saying. So to say there's a debate about masks, it's very clear that there is not really a legitimate debate about mask wearing. That is what the guidelines are, and that it's clear that this is what people should be doing. So I just want to make sure there's no false equivalency of any kind about. We're not debating safety precautions.
100%. I think
precautions that are important.
I think the point that I was trying to make, and I apologize if this wasn't clear enough, is just to say that all of these precautions, none of them is a panacea. It's not like, well, I'm wearing a mask, so that means I'm safe. There's a bunch of different dimensions of risk, again, depending on what activity you're doing, what the environment is, how close you are to other people, what the other people are doing, how long you're in that environment, all of which matters. So, and I do think that, in that sense, I think theme parks can provide, some advantages versus, wearing a mask on its own.
Well, and I think one thing about it is there are people out there that say, oh, well, this isn't effective, so we're just going to not do anything. And that's just dumb. Oh, yeah. So
I would, if it comes out in late 2021 that actually the mask didn't do anything, I'm not going to be mad that we did it, because we're operating with limited information. Things are changing all the time, and we have to do the best that we can. The information that we have today says that wearing a mask is one of the most effective precautions we can take. And if information changes a month from now or 3 months from now, then we're going to need to move along with that.
I mean, honestly, the longer this goes on, the more empirical evidence there is, scientific empirical evidence that masks do work. With all the scientific studies that are coming out, with all the that's the radio spectrometry, but those special photography techniques where you can see the droplets coming out of your mouth and your nose, with a mask, without a mask, and all that, and the petri dishes coughing on a petri dish with and without a mask, and all that. It's just well, yeah, duh. I mean, it seems pretty obvious, but the more scientific evidence we have to back that up, the easier it will be to refute all these, no maskers.
Oh, yeah.
This is not an issue anywhere else in the world. This is just an American issue. So we don't have to get into that. That's more of a political. For some reason, it's a political discussion.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting to talk about in terms of theme parks is I am confident that there will come a time, I don't know how far away that time is, but there will come a time when we won't have to be wearing masks anywhere, and we'll be able to go about our lives without constant fear that we're going to be infected by or to spread the virus. However, now that we're spending a lot of time thinking about our proximity to other people and thinking about, are there air droplets landing, on my face and all that, I do wonder if even 5 years from now, there is going to be, less patience on the part of guests for being, in environments where they have to be really close to other people. That's not something that anyone particularly liked before COVID, but I think going forward, I do think that there's, probably going to be more demand for effective, personal space in environments. And, so many things, whether it be theme parks or airplanes or other businesses, have been spending years trying to think, how can we cram more people in this space? And I think that there's going to be a much tighter eye on that now. Now that people are really having to think about what does it mean to be really close to someone else.
Yeah, I agree. I really do agree with that. And, I think we've all traveled to China and Asia and the Middle East, and even the Middle East, I've seen people wearing masks, mostly Southeast Asian people. But in China and and the rest of Asia, I mean, it's just a culture. It's become a cultural thing, and it's not a sense of distrust. It's I'm protecting you from me more than anything, and that's the kind of change of mind that Americans need to have in particular. Like that you said, you know, you're afraid of infecting other people, not so much of getting infected. That's why you wear a mask, and I
Yeah.
agree. I mean, because you never know. I mean, and even so, I mean, COVID aside, you know, I mean, you know, we've all had like mild colds where
Right.
like, you know, we can carry on, we got the sniffles, but like, you know, it's not the end of the world. We can't knock it out of bed, you know, and we go on with our lives. We go to work, you know,
Yeah.
like regular people. I mean, here's my work,
Yeah.
but like, um, but yeah, going into like especially an open plan office, you know, where there's like, you know, 100 people breathing the same air. And, you know, I think masks are here to stay
Yeah.
to some extent. I mean, I certainly, you know, am going to think twice about wearing a mask or not, like on an airplane, you
Mm,
know, just as a matter of like, well, I'm used to it now, so I might as well wear the mask now and reduce my chance of, you know, getting sick or at cons or at conventions, places like that where we, you know, we go to IAPA, you know, or like you go to cons like Comic-Con, you get the con flu,
mm.
you
Yeah.
know. It's a real thing. I mean, you know, it's not pleasant, it's not fun, but you know, you can make it fun with different prints and whatever like that. But
Yeah, I mean, we're all going to have a lot of masks on hand at such a time as this current crisis comes to an end that we can use in the future. And you know, if one silver lining of this could be that we are more cognizant about stopping if we do get sick, making sure that we don't spread it to others in the future. You know, there could be some really positive outcomes to that.
We're,
Uh,
we're really going to need like a revolution because people who handle your food can't really afford to not work. So
yeah,
like
well,
there's
I
a
think
lot.
I think that's the other tricky thing about this current theme park environment is, you know, here in Central Florida, or here in Florida in general, Central or otherwise, you know, standard unemployment is $275 a week for a maximum of 12 weeks. If you lose your job or you're not able to work, that has obviously been you know, extended with the CARES Act with that extra $600. But you know, if you are someone who has been furloughed or unemployed since the middle of March, you know, we're coming up or have already passed 12 weeks on that, and then with the CARES Act, you know, ending in a couple of weeks, and you know, it's not just the theme parks too. There was actually a lot of discussions. There was some great pieces in the Orlando Sentinel as well that that questioned whether why Central Florida has chosen not to diversify its industry beyond tourism. And you know, that's sort of a discussion for another day. But the fact of the matter is, where we stand now, we haven't done that. And not just the theme parks, but hundreds, if not thousands, of local shops, restaurants, malls, hotels, convention centers, etc., are all really centered around visitors from theme parks who come and stay in those hotels and shop in those shops, eat at those restaurants when they're not at the parks, or conventions that come here. And so, you know, I think we would be having a very different conversation if we were in a world where we could say, hey, you know what, the government, the federal government is good, because obviously the Florida government too also relies on the tax dollars from all those activities. Mm-hmm. So just like we're not making money, they're not making money. So if we could say, hey, you know, the central government is going to come in to ensure that businesses can stay solvent, that people are going to be continued able to pay rent and to feed their families and all that, I think that's maybe a different conversation too when we're talking about, you know, should businesses be reopening. But unfortunately, you know, we, again, without making it a political debate, just from where we are right now, businesses don't have a lot of options as they look towards the future. And, you know, while the CARES Act and all that has helped, unfortunately, I know that there are many, you know, Disney employees who haven't been able to access the funds that they should be getting to support themselves over these past few months. Even with the parks open, there's still thousands of cast members who are furloughed. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the decision of whether Disney or Universal or someone else chooses to try and reopen and start making money again and being able to pay their employees again is one piece of a much larger puzzle. And I would just want people to keep in mind. I understand people who are criticizing, saying, how could we possibly be reopening something as inessential as theme parks during a time such as this? But there are a lot of other things riding on this. And while as a society, there's certainly other ways that we could address those issues, the current circumstances have left us without a lot of good options.
I know that a lot of people in Las Vegas are asking those same questions too, about diversification of business, and not being so reliant on tourism and conventions and gambling revenue and things like that. And I know a lot of community leaders there are asking all those questions. I mean, like, why can't we get into aerospace? Why can't we get into technology and other things like that and attract other industries because of this?
Yeah, it's like I'm always of the mindset of like, this is temporary. While the damages are going to be for several years. The event industry is in complete hibernation. Concerts are in like, we know that our industry specifically is hit really hard. But like, I'm hopeful that like this is not a once every decade thing. It's more like a once every century thing. And so that people are eager to get back to the way things are. And it's not going to be okay, here comes another pandemic, we're shutting the economy down. Like, that's just not sustainable in any way. So I'm hoping.
But like with stocks and investments, like diversification is never bad. I mean, it's never bad for an investment point of view or a societal or economic point of view for a city or a region. I mean,
well, it's like everything else. We're always fighting the last war. I think that most major companies, whether they be airlines or hotels or theme parks or movie theaters, were prepared to the extent that they could be for a 2008 style economic crisis, where you say, there's a lot of people who don't have money or don't have jobs, and there's less money, less demand for these entertainment products. But we're in this funny thing now of, you could personally send every American a check for $1 million, and I don't know that it would have a significant impact on the demand for movie theaters or theme parks right now. Right. My parents live in Las Vegas. They're not going to the Strip. They're not going downtown. And it's got nothing to do with money. It's because they are in an age cohort where they know that they are at high risk for coronavirus, and they're not going to do it, not for all the money in the world. So, I think that as we move forward, going into this crisis, nobody had a plan, right? Disney World, Universal has never closed for months on end before, ever. Going back, Disneyland's been open 60 years. They've never been closed more than 2 days in a row. So I don't think it's ever going to be the case going forward that there won't be some thought given toward what if a pandemic were to happen again, then what would we do? And I think as well, that's part of the thing too here, right, is the fact that we weren't prepared. Because people say, how is it that the theme parks closed when the cases were here, and now the cases are here and we're reopening? Like, how could that make sense? And I guess the thing that I would say is, in those months, we now have a lot more information about what is and is not safe, and what precautions do or do not work with regards to the virus. And the theme parks that are open today are not the same theme parks that they were when they closed. The experience has been changed significantly as a response to coronavirus. And I think that's another thing that we need to keep in mind. In a world where maybe we were prepared to turn on a dime and say, okay, now we're going to do temperature checks. Now we're going to start requiring masks. Now we're going to do this. In March, we didn't know what to do. And so the only thing to do was to stop everything until we could figure out a plan. So now that at least that we have a plan, I think there's at least an argument to say, is there a way for us to operate these things safely?
So it's kind of weird because the TEA did like a little bit of an event right around March, right when we went into lockdown. And it was the people from China saying that they were kind of on the other side, on the other way of the way out. And basically what China did was they did contact tracing. Everyone had to stay where they were. If you went out in the public, you had a temperature check. You walked out of your building, you had a temperature check.
Yeah.
In public, you had a temperature check. And they had apps where if you were going to a grocery store, you had to get you were traced, and that if you could turn positive, they could notify all the people that had been there that day and they need to go on the quarantine. We didn't do any of that, and not a lot of other countries did. So obviously, that's pretty.
I think China, they had been through SARS and a few other pandemic scares in years past, and so they were much more ready to say, hey, this is happening, and that means we got to do X. And if you think 5 years from now, if there was a report that there's a new, which there will be, because think about how many almost pandemics we've had. I remember when I was in college, it was about swine flu, or Ebola. In a few years, when there's word that, hey, there's a new potential pandemic that is, wherever it starts, everyone's going to say, oh man, whatever we got to do to make sure we don't end up in 2020 again, that's what we're going to do. And I think people will be.
I hope you're right.
Yeah. Maybe that's too optimistic. I hope I'm right too.
I hope not. I mean, that's definitely one favorable scenario.
Well, man, we have the last major pandemic was in 1918, right? The flu of 1918, the Spanish flu. That's what it's called. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology for it. But that was 100 years ago, and technology's gotten a lot better. So I'd like to think that but we're also a globalized world where people try us.
That's the thing is that So I'll tell you what, gentlemen. So I think we've gotten a lot more into talking about viruses than we have about theme parks. So if you guys want to see some photos,
yes,
I did prep some photos. Let me see if I can do the magic screen sharing thing here. All right. So this was yesterday. Can you see my screen?
Wow. Yep.
Yeah.
This was yesterday.
Wow.
Is it going to play? Maybe not. Oh, there we go. With me getting off the monorail at Magic Kingdom.
Yeah.
This was at probably 2 or 3 in the afternoon on Sunday. So still several hours until the park closes.
Is that a friend of yours in front of you, or you're just trailing?
That was the one other person who was on the monorail with us. It was myself, my wife, and then in a different car, that guy. And that was the whole monorail.
From the TTC?
Yeah, from the Transportation and Ticket Center. So we went to the Transportation Ticket Center, got on the express monorail, went around, and ended up here at the entrance. And as you can see, it's just a whole lot of nobody. Carly Weissel, the theme park journalist who's been reporting this past weekend upon the theme park reopening, she was making a good point too, that in the past, a lot of the advice has been, get there early before the crowds show up. But if anything, it's more the opposite now of it's get there later in the day, maybe, so that, because usually by mid-afternoon, with no lines and a lot of experiences and entertainment not being offered, by mid-afternoon, everyone's done. It's hot. They've done everything they want to do. They're ready to get out of there. This is Peter Pan's flight, which, normally is very busy, and there's just no one there. This was actually when I was exiting. You can see all the cast members are wearing masks and also wearing face shields on top of the masks. And that's because they are considered to be, people who are coming in relatively close proximity with people quite a lot. So they're wearing those face shields as an additional precautionary measure. But yeah, it was just really, really empty.
Surreal. That's surreal.
Yeah, no, it is. And so here's the Hall of Presidents. Now, I will say, social distancing in the Hall of Presidents, not usually a challenge, even pre-COVID. But you can see here, so every other row is closed off, and there are basically you've got sort of 4 seats on, 3 seats off, to make sure that you're not. And by the way, if you are a group of more than 4, you still have to stay within those zones to ensure that you aren't spilling over and getting too close to someone else.
Are you actually going to watch the Hall of Presidents, or are you just going there to take a photo?
I did watch it. I was with someone who had never seen the Donald Trump Hall of Presidents, and honestly, I was surprised that they were running it. I kind of felt like that's a really easy attraction to say, well, it's not that popular anyway, and it's an indoor theater, and who really wants to go see, the president speak at this moment in time? But no, they're running it.
It would have been really funny if they had put masks on all of the presidents except Trump.
Oh, I know, right? So this is like heading towards Pirates of the Caribbean. Here's over by the Haunted Mansion. But basically, this is looking at the Tron coaster. But basically, the story is the same. Everywhere we went, staying spread out from other people just was not a challenge. So now we're in Animal Kingdom. So this is, Village of Harambe.
Wow.
No one there.
On a side note, what do you think of the new colors for the castle now that you've seen it in person?
I don't know. So the number one thing I want to say is that they are not finished painting the castle.
Okay.
They're not finished painting it. There's still a lot of work being done. So I think it's maybe still a little premature to give a final verdict either way. At first, I really didn't like it because I just kind of felt like it's been gray for 50 years, and I'm not sure how I feel about it being pink now. So here, by the way, you can see them. It's literally like paint by numbers, just writing numbers, and that's how they know which color of gray to paint on the brick. But now that I've had kind of a few days to get used to it, if you can get over that fact of, well, it wasn't pink before, there's really not a big difference between this and, say, Disneyland's castle. Certainly it's not nearly as pink as Disneyland Paris's castle. So I suppose there's no objective reason why it couldn't be pink.
It's funny. I've always not liked the Magic Kingdom castle. It always felt really dated to me, like in a really 60s kind of way.
Sure.
And I always struggled I always wondered if that was the design or the colors. And what's funny is seeing your pictures now, and then seeing some of the other pictures on Twitter and Instagram. I realize it's not the massing of the structure or the detail or anything like that, but it really was the coloring. That stark white and blue and gold struck me as almost like a Mary Blair 60s kind of color scheme and design, and then seeing it painted in this more 21st century, highly saturated, high contrast, really aggressive color scheme that like it suddenly brought it into the 21st century for me and changed the way I looked at it. And I'm really anxious to see it in person eventually.
I think the biggest qualm I have about it right now, and this is why I stopped on this picture, is if you see these gold accents. Now obviously it's not a real castle, but we do want to be able to suspend our disbelief that it could be made of stone and it could be made of brick. So when I look at a lot of the gold accents that are filling the frame right now, which are it's obviously concrete, that previously was painted to look like stone, and now it's painted gold. So in looking at it, not for a second do I feel like, oh, all of that is made of metal, because it's clearly not. I think, well, it's stuff that's had gold paint slathered on it, and I guess it could be stone that has gold paint slathered on it. But I do think that it's been pulled away a bit from something that really invites you to suspend your disbelief that this could be a structure that is actually constructed out of real materials, and it kind of pushes it a bit more into something that is more of kind of a fantasy dollhouse writ large. And I think the highly saturated, almost metallic color on the turrets has that effect as well. Again, I don't know that that's an objectively bad choice. It's just a different choice than what was happening before. I think that it's a big change from what we had before, and so I think we'll have to give it some time once we're used to it, and don't have that immediate reaction to say, "Ooh, this is different," before we can really say how we feel about it.
So talk about the cavalcades they have. You just had a picture of it. So
yeah. So the cavalcades are basically, they got some floats, they got characters on the floats, and the crucial thing here is that the characters are not only on a float that's moving, but they're all 6 feet away from each other. And I think I have somewhere over here from yesterday. Okay, so here's another case. So now we got dancers this time, and the dancers aren't on a float, but they are moving, and they're all spaced out from each other. And you can kind of see on the left there's also cast members on both sides of the street who are watching to make sure that guests are not leaving the pathway and walking towards the dancers.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely been some criticism of not having the performers wear masks. I will say it is factually true that at Universal, almost all of the performers and characters are not only distanced, but are also wearing masks. I think certainly in terms of these dancers here who are just costume dancers, there's no reason they couldn't be wearing masks. And actually, if you see on the bottom right there, the female dancer who's wearing the red and polka dot dress, there was actually a guest, a young woman, who was wearing sort of a cosplay recreation of that exact costume. And she had made a pattern matching mask with that same kind of colored bubbles white and red, red fringe on it. So she was able to make a matching mask for it. I don't think there's any reason really why Disney couldn't do the same thing. And, I think you do have to be cognizant of, when you have people who are out there in a theme park environment and they're not wearing masks, how is that affecting the safety of the cast members, but also how is it affecting how safe people feel they are and how safe people feel the cast members are, both of which are very important. Because if people feel that Disney isn't keeping their employees safe, then they're not going to want to go either.
And I kind of feel like, the line of a dancers be trailing, I can get my head around, okay, we don't want Tinkerbell wearing a mask. I can have a discussion about that. But trailing performers having a cute little mask or some sort of covering, it's okay, well, I can do that, So I hear you on that one.
Yeah, and those are those tough questions, right? If we're going to say princesses shouldn't be wearing masks, then maybe princesses aren't a thing we can do right now.
Right.
I don't know. Like I said, on a purely factual level, if you're up on a float, there's no one around you, the float is moving, you're outside, and if you have the opportunity, as I presume they do, to once you get backstage, you can put a mask on before you go near anyone else, then there's probably no major safety concern. The odds that you're up on a float that's moving outdoors, that you are going to, be exposed to infection from someone else are vanishingly small. But it's not just about keeping people safe. That's the most important thing. But the second most important thing is making sure people feel safe. And I think those things have to be balanced.
So anybody that's been to Magic Kingdom on a Sunday, you went Sunday or Saturday? What day did you go?
This was Sunday. So this was yesterday afternoon that we're talking about. This is opening week.
You're able to see a video with one guy in it on a Sunday, July 12th. This would be packed wall to wall people. This is incredible footage.
Yeah, and this is the first weekend that it's been open after 3+ months of closure. This is all the pent up demand, of the people who really had to get out there that first weekend and see it.
Well, to be fair, that annual passes they booked out of annual pass holder slots, so they were.
So annual pass holders were. All the slots that were made available to annual pass holders were completely booked up this whole weekend for Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom.
It's booked up for actually a month. It's booked out.
At the moment, I think the first day that you could go to any of the 4 parks on a weekend is 6 or 8 weeks from now. and every weekday in July is booked out too. So yeah, there's just no one there. And then this was now Magic Kingdom is just closed, like 15 minutes before, and this is all the people leaving the Magic Kingdom to get on a monorail to go back to their car and or hotel.
They're running it like, yeah, I think your estimation is right. Like maybe 1,000 or 1,500 people in the whole park all day.
Yeah, I would say for the day we're talking maybe 5,000 total who are even allowed to come in, and then maybe 1,000 or 2,000 that are pass holders, because whatever their total limit was of people that they were prepared to accept, slots for people who were buying day tickets, not annual pass holders, were still available, and slots for people staying at an on-site hotel were still available. So whatever the small number of people was that they deemed that they were willing to bring in, they didn't even have that many. Andy, here's for you is more of a contextual of the Castle at Sunset.
Hold on a second. Just because we keep talking about it. So this is the availability calendar that they have on the website. So right now, Disney Resort guests, they have some availability. Epcot and looks like Disney Hollywood Studios is sold out for at least this next couple of weeks. And then it starts becoming available. Annual pass holders are blocked. And just so everybody knows, like the pass holders that right now are like premier pass holders that are paying upwards of $1,000 for their tickets that normally are unblocked during the summer. So it's a very limited group anyway, and I presume, Ben, you're a part of that select group.
Yeah.
You have to go all the way out until basically the 30th of August, and then at that point, the only park available is Epcot.
Oh, I'll tell you what, Steve. So go to September now. So my birthday is September 12th, and on September the 12th, there's one park I can visit.
Do you think they're going to expand that as they get more run-in time with the operations and get more comfortable with the employees and the cast members and the guest ratio? Do you think that they'll open more slots up?
I mean, I definitely think is their plan, was to say, let's start small. We know there's going to be all eyes on us for that first week or two, to say, ooh, Disney is open. What did it look like? And I think that Disney wanted to make sure that there were not a rash of photos and videos of crowds forming and people not wearing masks. I was leaving Magic Kingdom yesterday with the park that empty. There was a family of 5 on Main Street taking a photo with a photo pass photographer. No one around them at all. And, they wanted to pull their masks down just to take the photo. And they said, no, you got to put your mask back on or we won't take the photo. And I don't know if this is true. There's been some rumor reports online that if guests pull their mask down and are captured that way on an on-ride photo, that Disney will pull the photo. So I imagine that their plan was to, after the first couple of days or maybe the first week or two, to slowly start expanding it. That maybe it goes from 5,000 to 10,000 to 15,000, which would still be a tiny fraction of what the parks would normally be seeing. But, obviously right now we're continuing to go up in terms of number of cases in Florida. And, some people are saying, hey, we might be, reaching our peak, in the next couple of weeks. I have no idea what truth there might be to that. But if I'm Disney, maybe I just say, you know what, we're going to keep operating at kind of the bare minimum just to really, really reduce the risk that anything bad is going to happen. And, if things start to improve a month from now, we can always add more slots.
Yeah.
But Orange County Mayor Demings was on did a press conference today where he basically said, I think Disney's doing a great job, but if hospital capacity really starts to get critical, or if we kind of see things coming out of Disney that don't look good, we wouldn't hesitate to ask them to close down again. So I think right now they've got the parks open. And the number one thing for them is just going to be to try and avoid a situation where they have to close again, even if that means they can only let in a tiny number of people. But stuff's changing so much week to week. It's who's to say where we might find ourselves some time from now. Here's another one. So this was the California Grill, make this bigger. Opening night, they had only opened reservations for the grill like 24 hours before, but they were able to get a full seating with lots of empty tables for social distancing. But even there, by 9:30, the place was empty. Because there's no fireworks, there's no reason for people to stick around or to book a late dinner. And I do wonder, if places like this are seeing a decent business now, with that pent-up demand from several months of closure, as we get a few weeks here and everyone's kind of done that thing, been to that restaurant or that park that they've been dying to go to for a couple of months, if then it the demand is going to start to go down. And that seems to be the pattern that we've had with most things, that when they open, there's a lot of interest all at the beginning. And then after that, the interest slowly starts to fade.
Yeah, it makes me rethink my assumptions about how things are going to go down here at Disneyland Resort when they reopen. I wonder, how much more cavalier some of the Orange County residents are going to be about, their hesitation or not to go to the parks and their willingness to wear masks, et cetera, because, we have a large contingent of very conservative people in Orange County who aren't big fans of wearing masks and certain other presumed freedoms. But I don't know. I feel like maybe clearer heads will prevail and people will stay away, even if the parks reopen, even when they do, even if it's a month from now.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. We've had a bunch of headlines here in Orlando recently about the number of employees at Publix, which is our local chain of grocery stores. There's been, I think, 30 plus employees that had confirmed cases of COVID. And yet, Universal and SeaWorld have been open for over a month now. And, obviously, if you're running a business that has tens of thousands of employees in a state that has thousands and thousands of cases, just statistically even, the odds that a couple of them might be diagnosed with COVID would seem to be fairly high. But so far, we really haven't seen any evidence that theme parks are contributing to the spread of the disease. And, that's true today. We'll have to keep a close eye on it. But so far, theme parks do not seem to be part of the problem. So what I'm looking now,
that's a really hard claim to make, though, without contact tracing. Like that's
sure.
There's no way anybody can falsify that, what you're saying, because we don't have the tools to do that. Not to rain on your parade, but I want to be very careful of where we're.
Yeah. Again, we don't know what we don't know. The only thing that I would say is that, if it was the case that employees in theme parks were publicly saying, "Hey, I've got COVID," or whatnot. I feel like with the amount of stuff that gets shared on social media, we would or will hear about that. And my hope, my hope is that in the case of Disney, they're saying, "Hey, if you don't feel comfortable coming to work, you can remain on furlough." The theme parks are making sure that if people feel sick, they can stay home. They don't have to worry about, I'm going to get fired because I called out sick to work. So between that and the precautions that are being taken, my hope is it can stay that way. But I mean, you're right. We don't have a lot of data about what's going on. But luckily in Central Florida, we have been pretty good in terms of our access to testing. We've got at Orange County Convention Center a pretty good test site open. So I hope that if anything does happen, I hope it comes out and we can deal with it.
Cool. I that's great. And I really want to, I know we're running long, but I want to get to Christian Marcus's questions about spending money, marketing dollars on local marketing rather than tourists. Like he points out the like the Salem, Massachusetts is sort of like the epicenter of Halloween for the East Coast, and they rely a lot on drawing a lot of people from out of state into the local economy there. And for regional, I think that translates well to regional parks, like a Knott's Berry Farm, things like that. I mean, like, because people do travel. I mean, I've traveled to Orlando just to go to Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando, because it is vastly superior to Hollywood. Sorry, not sorry. But I mean, I wonder, should regional attractions and regional parks focus their marketing dollars on local business rather than like trying to like reach into the into further realms for tourism.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm in the local market. I find it hard to believe that there's many marketing dollars being spent at this point on trying to convince out-of-state visitors to come.
Yeah.
I do know that there's been some guidance from Disney released to travel agents to basically say, hey, if guests come right now, they're welcome to come, but there's not going to be fireworks. They're not going to get to meet the princesses. We're going to have reduced hours. Certain attractions and restaurants are not going to be offered. Certain hotels are not going to be available. And if guests have concern about that, we would really invite them to come back next year, to rebook for next summer. So I think the focus is on locals. And then also in the case of Disney, they've also got Disney Vacation Club members because, those Vacation Club members have prepaid for those hotel stays, and they're kind of use them or lose them. So they're a bit more motivated, if they live a drive away, to come and do their weekend at Disney, to go to the parks or not. But other than that, I'd be surprised. I had a friend of mine who I used to work with at Disneyland actually a long time ago, and she had planned a trip to come out for which it turned out was going to be just after the parks reopened this past week with her two kids who had never been to Disney World, and she was concerned because her partner had wanted to go because the parks were going to be open and they had the trip planned. And she was concerned, not even so much about the safety thing, but just about, well, now you have to, reserve it in advance. And what if we go and we can't get in? And I said to her, if you are spending money to fly from California out to Florida to go to Disney World, and this is obviously in early June, we were having this conversation, and it's your children's first time at Disney World, is it worth the effort to come out here when there's not going to be fireworks, there's not going to be dinner with the princesses, there's not going to be a parade, you know what I mean? The parks are all going to be closed before dark, I don't think it's worth the money right now.
Yeah.
To do that. If you're a local like me and you have an annual pass, then maybe. But the parks haven't gotten any cheaper. The tickets aren't discounted.
So yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like, just candidly, I think that a lot of the parks are doing that. I know Disney is they have different offers right now. I just got an offer for Universal where for Florida residents, buy a day, get the next day free. They're starting to do that kind of stuff. But what's so interesting about the Orlando market is that we are just so reliant on international and domestic travels who are taking the week off. You'll see Universal, they get a big bump on the weekends because those are annual pass holders coming. But during the week, it's just not a lot of people. I totally agree with your assessment, Ben, that like I think right now during this weird period, it makes sense to get $100 a month from an annual pass holder who's going to go and use it like a RD&E, a retail dining entertainment center. Go get a drink, go walk around Epcot, maybe go on a ride, and just use the park a lot differently than a traveler will. Like I think that makes sense. If anybody was like, oh, I want to go to Disney World right now and they're traveling, you got to be insane to do that. It doesn't look very fun. But for you and me, we go, we at least used to go every other, maybe a couple times a month, check things out. We go and we go to the park to enjoy ourselves, maybe check out something new, relax with friends. It's almost just like a recreational activity for us. Like other people might in LA, you might go to the beach or, elsewhere you do other things that are a little, similar type of recreational activity. It's kind of like our form of recreation in Orlando. So and especially us in the industry. So I totally agree with that assessment. Makes sense.
Honestly, even for locals, I mean, it is a tough thing. I think that one of the things that this whole experience has really made me think about is, what are the essential elements of these experiences that make us feel about them the way that we do? And I think it's not always clear. A question like, would you still like theme parks if there was no fireworks or no parade? And you might say, yeah. But when you're actually faced with that, you go, well, no, I'm not so sure. And I think there's little things like the fact that the parks aren't open after dark. Theme parks have a very different kind of magic to them at night, and there is none of that right now. And for me personally, as a local, we're currently right now less than a mile away from the Magic Kingdom. I like to go and be able to pop in, maybe ride one or two things, and leave. And now it's like I go in. I've got I have a spot reserved for Hollywood Studios for next Saturday, and then my next opportunity to go is a month later. So I'm going to be going next Saturday going, if I don't do it today, I'm not going to be doing it for at least another month. And so it's forcing me to approach the parks in a much different, much less casual way. The other thing is, I think part of the reason that we do like theme parks is they are kind of the entertainment equivalent of an all-you-can-eat buffet. There's more stuff to see and do than you could ever see and do. And it's kind of like if you go to an all-you-can-eat buffet and then they just give you a plate of food, those might be the only things you would have eaten from the buffet anyway, factually. But the experience of feeling like there's all of this possibility is gone. And that's sort of the thing that makes the buffet, right? It's not the amount of food, it's the options and the opportunity. And, when we're in an experience where, first of all, a lot of attractions and shows are not available. And the ones that are don't have any wait, which sounds like a good thing, but it's like you can go to Animal Kingdom and Navi River Journey is a walk-on. Avatar Flight of Passage is a walk-on. The Safari is a walk-on. Dinosaur is a walk-on. Everest is a walk-on. And after an hour and a half, you've done everything in the park, and there's no entertainment, there's no characters, there's no musicians, playing music, there's no nighttime show to stick around for. You're just kind of done. And it's like, well, is there even any reason for me to stick around here? Like, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to change. And how many times am I going to come back and do that?
It's like it goes from seeing it as like an amenity to being almost like special again.
Yeah, so there is an odd aspect of as a tourist, it's obviously not that full experience, but as a local, a lot of locals do go for the festivals, for the holiday events. They go to see bands or to see decorations or whatever, and none of that stuff is happening. And like I said, I'm going to go to Hollywood Studios on Saturday, and I am excited about that, but there's no Fantasmic, there's no Indiana Jones show, there's no Streetmosphere characters walking around. The park doesn't have the biggest roster of attractions. Once you've done it all, I mean, the park's open for 10 hours. It's not going to take 10 hours to do everything.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's better than nothing, I guess. But I do think for reasons that have nothing to do specifically with a fear of COVID, I just don't see myself visiting the parks as frequently, because I think if I did, I was just going to burn out on everything.
Right. Too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
Andy, you're about to say something?
Well, I was just going to say basically what Ben already said about, you're just going to get burnt out because it's not the park that it was 6 months ago, without the Streetmosphere. I mean, it's not a casual stroll in the park with all the other people and everything going on, and sort of like the buffet aspect that you mentioned. I hadn't thought about that, and the psychology of the buffet is one of the things I love about buffets is the embarrassment of riches, and the ultimate of choices, of like, we could go on Rise of the Resistance, or we could go on Spaceship Earth, or we could go on Kali River Rapids, or whatever you want. I mean, you do whatever you want. We can, call up and get reservations for, beer garden, all of that is sort of gone.
So there's sorry, Andy. There's a couple of interesting things like that I think are really important. First off, like the queue and the waiting for the experience builds up the anticipation for the attractions. Like that's part of it. Like I got a boarding group and I got to wait around and I got to go home and wait for another like that like excitement builds up to it. And I did a VIP tour once. I was the like a test and adjust for this one thing they were doing. I'm like being able to, and it was just like for a brief period. It was really awesome though. But like just being backdoored on every single ride, at a certain point, you're just kind of like, you're gonna get numb to it. Like it's great, but like it's not as great as like parting the strategy. Like there's one thing about a fast pass, but even fast pass, you wait a little bit, and you had to find that fast pass, and you had to book it in advance, and so you're already excited for it. But just walking into an empty park, like part of the experience is definitely different, and it's a very interesting psychological thing. And the idea of going to Epcot, and I'll go to Epcot and I'll walk around, but no fireworks, like 9 o'clock it just closes. Like I don't know if I want to do that. Like I kind of want to see that, like
I'm thinking about this too. Which I'm calling the theme park attendance uncanny valley. And you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with the uncanny valley. For any viewers that aren't, that basically when you have any kind of character, doll, model, animatronic, drawing, whatever, that looks vaguely humanoid or human-like, the more and more human it gets, kind of the more likable and emotionally, investable it is, until it gets really close, and then suddenly it becomes kind of horrifying. And I think theme parks right now, it's kind of the same thing. Nobody likes a Magic Kingdom New Year's Day. It's stuffed full of people. There's no personal space. Everything's a 3-hour wait. Nobody likes that experience. And then as the busyness of the park starts to go down, the amount of the experience is pleasant gets more and more. There's more space. You can do more things. The wait times for things are less, so you're not waiting for hours. And the experience kind of gets better and better and better. And then right as you get towards sort of the most empty, there is that kind of uncanny valley where you're walking around being like, man, there's no one here. If there's no one here, should I be here? And even walking around a theme park that is closed, that is closed, if you're an employee and it's totally empty and there's people there getting the park ready for the day or putting things away for the night, can be kind of magical in its own way. But to be in a park that is open and there's cast members standing in empty restaurants, standing like that photo we looked at of Peter Pan's Flight of they're just standing there.
I had that experience at IMG Worlds of Adventure in Dubai, where we went one day when I was there 2 years ago, and for the opening of Warner Brothers World Abu Dhabi, and man, was it unsettling. I didn't have time. The guests were outnumbered by employees, probably 2 or 3 to 1, and it was just like you'd walk into a shop, like this giant Marvel, like 2-story Marvel comic shop, and there's like 10 employees just kind of like standing around looking at you, like expectantly, like, oh, are they going to talk to me? Are they going to ask me a question? Do they need help? Like, do you need help? And it's just like, and I started really like feeling like really self-conscious and really feeling bad about their plight of standing there for hours on end, not interacting with anybody and guests or anything like that. It was like, man, and every attraction and every shop and every restaurant was like that. And it was like, it was not great.
Yeah, it's, you do need some people there to give the place life. I was walking yesterday, we were walking out of Adventureland. It was maybe 5:45, 6 o'clock. Park closes at 7. And Skipper Canteen, the restaurant in Adventureland, was open. And all the restaurants that are open have limited menus. So maybe half the menu items that they had before are orderable now. So we were kind of looking at the menu board and say, well, we wonder what made it to this limited menu. And a customer came up to us and said, hey, you guys want to come in and like have a drink or maybe get some noodles or something? And we're like, no, we're crazy. It's like, you sure? Because, we got, and like, was really begging us to come in, not even have a meal, like just come in and order like a cocktail or some wine or something.
I do that.
But like, that's, it feels like that would be great. Like, you're just walking around the Magic Kingdom, everything's walk on. You can walk into any restaurant. Similar experience. We went to be our guest, and we go to order. We say, okay, well, so this is what we want for drinks and for appetizers. She's like, no, we can take care of that later. And then she came back later and like took our appetizer orders. And it's like, okay, and for our entrees, she's like, no, let's put in the appetizers. Like, then we can figure out the entree. And literally, it took like 2.5 hours, not because they were busy, but because there was just like, what's the rush? There's no one here. We're not going to turn this table.
Yeah, you can walk on anything.
Like just hang out, man. Like, you might as well. Which again is kind of nice, but also just weird.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Ben. So maybe a final question. No, it's been, but all these people are hanging on to every word. No one's left yet. I can tell. So like, one thing that our theme parks and amusement parks are kind of known for, they say escapism. Some people will say reassurance that that there's good in the world. Like, when you're walking around, like how much of COVID-19 is there, like, on your head? Like, how were you able to enjoy it knowing what's going on in the world?
It's like I was saying earlier, literally, as you walk around the parks, they have an announcement, a COVID-19 announcement that basically says, yo, please remember, you have to have your mask on. You need to social distance. You need to wash your hands. And they're playing that throughout the whole park, maybe every 15 minutes. And you're walking by, and half the shops have a sign on the door that just say, sorry, we're closed. And, obviously everyone's wearing a mask. And you go on rides, and, in the queues on the ride vehicles, sometimes they have plexiglass barriers, to keep you from getting too close to the next person. So, I wouldn't say, I really don't think it's possible in that environment to forget, but at the same time, I can't say that that's what I would want. I think if theme parks leaned too much in the direction of making you feel so safe that you forgot you were in a pandemic, I don't know that would be a positive thing right now. And, being in the industry, we've all heard a million stories of the bad things that can happen when guests forget that we're still in reality. And theme parks does not mean that the rules of the laws of nature don't still apply, and do stupid things because they're in a theme park. So yeah, I don't know that sense of escapism is there right now, but I don't think that escapism is what we need. And like I was saying kind of at the beginning, the thing that's comforting is the sense of control, is the sense that there are people everywhere who are keeping an eye on this, Mm-hmm. And I think if you walked around and didn't feel that way, to me, that's where it would start to become comforting. So I think right now, the best thing about a theme park environment is that it is such a tightly controlled environment. I went to the mall a couple of weeks for the first and last time, about 2 weeks ago, and some stores were really on top of it. Some kiosks and some stores were not on top of it at all, weren't wearing masks. Some people are wearing masks, some people aren't. And like, there's no central mall authority. There are no mall cops walking around trying to make sure that people are keeping their masks on. And individual stores, they just care about their shop. You know what I mean? If you're not in their shop, they're not going to wander out into the mall to tell you to put your mask on. You know what I mean? And so it's a little bit of an every man for himself thing. And we kind of said, you know what? We're not coming back here again.
Yeah.
All of our malls closed today.
Yeah. And I will say I do have serious concerns about indoor restaurants. I think if you're in a situation, you're being served by someone, you're in an enclosed room, you're chatting, you're not wearing a mask because you're eating, I feel like that's maybe a bridge too far right now. I think wandering around in a an mostly outdoors, controlled environment where everyone's wearing masks and distancing, fine. But restaurants, I don't know.
In my mind, eating inside at a restaurant is almost like having unprotected sex. Like, in my mind, it's like the same thing.
Yeah, it's risky.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Well, I don't think we'll top that, guys.
very good to end on.
Ben, how can people get a hold of you? How about Twitter? How can people follow you? What would you like to have? Do you have any plugs of any kind?
Oh, yeah. So at Ben Wszalek would be a great one. And I also am on Instagram at the same place. I usually post a lot of theme park photos, not so much the last few months. And I definitely have some fun personal projects I'm working on, not theme park affiliated, but they may be theme park related. And so if people want to follow me, they'll learn more about that in the future.
Cool. You just got one more follower.
Hey,
That's me.
I know, I see it. I see it on my phone. There it is.
Andy, how can people? I know you're trying to get more active on LinkedIn and Twitter. So how do they find you, Andy?
So yeah, my Twitter is still Make It Cool. That's an old name I had for my company and whatever. But I still use it because I've been on it for 10 years, and my whole 300 or so followers know me as that. But I still like to make things cool, so follow me while I make things cool.
Great, cool. And then you guys can all follow me on Twitter at Patrick S. Kling. So, folks, we're providing you. Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Follower. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me. I just wanted to say, one of the things that makes these discussions so tough is, we all have our personal biases. I love theme parks. Obviously, I work for a theme park company. I've had friends of mine that have been laid off, or, I personally had my pay cut because of everything that's going on. So I definitely can feel a bit defensive, for the theme parks. So I definitely appreciate some of your pushback to make sure that we're keeping it neutral. No, because that's super needed. I'm not an unbiased source, much as I try to focus on reality and focus on the science that's out there. And, we all have to be open to other perspectives and to, making sure that we're keeping an eye on the bigger picture. So,
it's funny. One of the things that I wanted to talk about that we didn't get a chance to, but maybe on another show, working on music and audio for big sort of theme park spectaculars that require large groups of people standing shoulder to shoulder most of the time to view and experience. I'm wondering, going forward, is there a way forward for viewing nighttime spectaculars? So I'd love to maybe have you back on to talk about that, and maybe others. Maybe
I have such strong feelings on this, Andy. So Patrick, you probably don't know, I bought a house very specifically with a very intense view of the fireworks in December. And I do take the lack of Disney fireworks a bit personally, and I am glued to the screen to be like, are they going to do some fireworks for the NBA one night? Like, are we going to get some fireworks in here? So yeah, that's definitely a great thing to talk about.
I'd love to talk with you about that in the future.
That'd be cool. And when it comes to like the bias thing, I have it too, where I want to defend our industry and say, well, and like whenever I see one of those like charts that shows like amusement park is the most dangerous thing, and like over a casino, a plane, I'm like, I don't know. I don't really understand. Like, I'm not really understanding how that makes sense. And gym, like look, if you're going to the gym, working out on equipment, sharing it, and like those to me seem like as a gym goer,
I'm not going to.
So I have my own personal biases. And I'm sure a gym owner would want to come on the show and say, no. It's all
wipe everything down. It's all fine.
So we all carry those. So that's all, so that's all fine. But no one's going to convince me that going on a plane is safer than being in an amusement park for the same duration. 2 hours in a theme park versus 2 hours going through TSA, going through security, no way. Sorry, folks. I don't know who's writing those things up. Doctors. But it's like, okay, come on. Folks, we're at a lot of content. We appreciate you watching. All we ask is that you share. Invite people to like the page. we keep growing and growing, which is pretty great. So it's pretty great to have new people. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next Monday. Who knows what we're going to talk about, but it's going to be great. Bye, guys.
Thank you again, Ben. Thank you, Ben, for coming on.
Thanks, Ben.
for having me.